All right, welcome everyone. My name is Jibril Ben-Sedrin. I'm hosting this webinar on behalf of SESA Systems. Today we are going to discuss how to get your operations back to work in a safe, efficient, and creative manner. We have two guest speakers today, a format a little bit different than usual, in a panel format, and they will share with us perspectives from continuous improvement managers. We are going to hear from Marie-Andree Morin, who is a methods project manager at Soucy. Soucy is a 12-facility, 1,700 employees that conceptualizes and manufactures various components for leading manufacturers of motorsport, industrial, agricultural, and defense vehicles. Earlier, she held positions including project manager, operational excellence manager, director of quality and continuous improvement in North American industrial companies. She is an industrial engineer and holds a postgraduate education in business management. We also have with us Daniel Rodrigues, who is the founder of TRG Consulting, specializes in increasing performance across entire processes. He brings 15 years of experience in finance, operations, supply chain management. He also held a America's lead for operational excellence position at a $20 billion technology company. Some of his achievements included 11 million annualized savings, and he holds an MBA in supply chain management and strategy from Rodrigues University. So the agenda will be starting with discussing with the people and organization how to prepare them for reopening. Then discussing the processes, adjustments, the new processes related to the COVID-19 situation, leading to a discussion on risk management, risk assessment, and then also tying all this, wrapping all this into the lean thinking methods, right? Making sure that we're approaching this with the right lean methodologies. We'll also discuss an extreme case of changes, which is the case where companies have to pivot. And finally, we'll have time for Q&A. So speaking of Q&A, the whole format will be Q&A. And I encourage you to share your questions as soon as they come to mind. We have a few already that we'll start with, and we'll then continue with yours. So please send them to me as soon as they come to mind. Very briefly, many of you are returning participants, so I'll be very quick. SESA Systems is one of your suppliers for many of you. We are organizing these webinars as part of the SESA Systems Academy. The Academy is typically an actual physical space, demo space, lab space, as well as now increasingly an online space like today. So as you know, we started to offer professional development hour certificates. Those of you interested will receive an email, follow-up email with an assessment. And as soon as you respond, you'll qualify for the professional development hour certificate. In terms of, again, 1 minute about SESA Systems, and just to understand kind of the background for the reason why we're organizing this, we're a world leader in visual, well, not just visual, really lean enterprise, with a broad range of products, including 2,500 used by 14,000 companies. Some of them you'll recognize here. I know some of you actually work in some of these companies today. And we provide educational games for lean, ergonomic furniture for offices, as well as for the shop floor, workstations, workbenches. In logistics space, we provide floor racks, trolleys, Kanban systems, as well as in the floor markings, indications, signage, safety signage, and in the industry 4.0, environment, we provide digital KPI management software and wireless and on lights, and in visual management, whiteboards and magnetic accessories. We also are here to support our customers in the current situation. So we have selected a number of products that can be useful to adjust operations, which some of them you see here on the screen, including safety signage, as well as shields, both personal protection and desktop and workstation shields, cleaning stations, and digital tools, as well as hygiene related. So basically, just briefly, a disclaimer, as this can be very sensitive safety questions. Just want to clarify that we're here to help. We don't mean to provide recommendations that are in any way medical or otherwise, and just wanted you to be aware of this. So I'm sure you don't need me to tell you this, but just want to clarify. So some background before actually we jump here. So sorry if it, just wanted to share with you again where we're coming from. I heard or read actually someone from the Automation Alley quoted in the Free Press, I think, saying that the new situation, really adjusting to it, will come. There's no one single, silver bullet. It's going to come in a million ways. Actually, that's what they said. Will come in a million different ways at a million different companies. And there's many ideas. So the reason why we selected 2 guest speakers also is to bring 2 different perspectives. Both of them come from different regions. So Marie-Andree from Canada, and one of the most, actually the 2, I think, most affected areas in North America, near Montreal. She's experienced actually going through this, actually maintaining operations, of course, adjusting operations through this situation. And Daniel Rodrigues in Minnesota, less touched, but still very, very engaged in really bringing the best practices. So we're going to hear 2 different situations, but both interesting to learn from. And also different industrial environments. They come from different industries. So hopefully all of you will hear something that you find resonates with you. And so without further ado, I will jump right in and start with a question for you in the audience. That is what is your biggest concern for your organization? Shortages of human resources, supplier-related issues, incomplete risk management programs, production modification still incomplete. And I'll bring the poll right now. You should be seeing it in your screen. So the poll is should be on your screen right now. Hopefully you can see it.
Yes, it's on my screen, just to be clear, Jabril. It's up.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so the answers are starting to get in. We're still at 1/3 of voters. The percentages are close to 65% voters. So as soon as we get to maybe 70, 2/3 of the participants. Yeah, so we see right now that the 4 of them are of concerns, but the top one is clearly incomplete risk management. That's 63% of you. So you can answer to more than one, right? So you can provide more than one answer. I could be concerned by all of them, but right now, so the incomplete risk management is really the main concern, followed by shortage of human resources, and that's 40%. 30% that the production changes are not complete. Supplier issues seem to be less a concern. Okay, so with that, I'll start with the first question, which is for either of you, Marie-Andree or Daniel. How do you propose people to manage the concerns? And I'm going to read briefly again a quote here from the Detroit Free Press from a representative in a large manufacturing company who was saying, there are several specific areas of concern. The close proximity of workers, which basically precludes any possibility of social distancing. The use of shared tools, right? Common gathering areas used for lunch or breaks, long shifts, meaning longer term exposure, and just the sheer number of people within the plant, especially in the assembly areas. So how do you suggest that can be handled?
Thank you, Gabriel. I will start with this one. We need to prepare everyone for a new normal situation, whatever it will look like. Like you said previously, Gabriel, all this is evolving days after days. So if whatever the concern people may have, it's really important to bring up your communication skills. So there are 4 categories of signs and symptoms of psychological distress, and all of those can be managed by a clear communication, clear and simple communication. In crisis like we are facing, many studies are suggesting to adapt internal communications frequency, so more often, frame it positive. And the important thing that may address many of those questions will be ensure to have a two-way communication, so a dialogue with your people to ensure to raise up all their concerns. And the important thing is they have to feel confident that they can address it and that we will all take care of it. So if I might, at least we have to have, for those kinds of situation, we need to have a clear communication policy. So who is communicating where and at what time, and if people are not there yet, so you're reopening, then you have to prepare for integration of work. Make sure that managers or HR resources are doing a personal communication for the people, including what they need to know before coming to work. Some companies use, as example, social media to inform everyone, and kind of safety training on the net that people have to comply on before coming to the shop floor or to the plant. What will be the entrance control? How we will control that? Do we have difference between shift teams, or do we have how we will manage social distancing? And all that example, if you think of using thermoscans or a way to control temperature with non-touch temperature, just ensure to do it. I apologize. I'm a mom working from home. Maybe hear my little one. And yes, cleaning. What did you have as a cleaning? What is mandatory, voluntary, social distancing? How you will cope with that? And a good idea that I found is a company that prepare a kind of care kit. So including PPE, procedure, like a kind of comprehensive playbook with all the procedure and protocols and what have changed. So people must feel comfortable. We have to address to ensure we talk to them with a confident way and open mindset. And sure, concerns and questions are welcome. Don't forget that we have to take care to the individuals that are more at risk of developing a serious illness after COVID-19 infection. So take care of, follow your government's recommendation.
And if I could,
yeah,
I'm sorry,
go ahead.
I could add to Marie's point as well, very well said. These are interesting times. I'm not surprised that the first or second highest response was the lack of human resources. And everything starts with the individual in this particular case. We're very much in a mode where we don't necessarily put, let's say, the focus on safety or the employee first. In some industries that's very old practice, but there's others where it's all about throughput and volumes, which is understandable. But those also, given this time period, the clear communication, also the mindset of something that's used here regularly with the governor's calls, which I found useful with some of my clients, is we think of this in terms of a dial, right? Initially, maybe there was a perception that there was an on and off switch where things are not good and then something would happen and we would return back to what's considered normal. But I believe moving forward, something that's helped with some of the stress and psychological aspect is if you think of it as a turning dial where there's maybe 8 or 10 different levels to the dial. You hope to turn them slowly enough as you're turning the volume up and things go well, but you also need to be prepared and have the communication mechanisms in place so that when you hit level 3 or 4, if you have a drawback or if something, let's say there's a change, that you are prepared also to turn back 1 or 2 steps to make sure that you're in compliance and you're doing the best for your people. So the communication plan is critical, and also kind of framing it less in the light switch mode of a binary yes, no, on, off, normal, not normal, with as kind of viewing this as a transition towards something new that not too many people know what it looks like on the other side.
Yeah, makes sense. So I guess that also requires putting in place new policies and procedures, right? And so can you tell us more about those?
Sure. So I believe the more popular one will be the social distancing, so 2 meters or 6 feet from each other. I believe it's the same in US and in Canada. As a policies, we should have to reinforce our hygiene instruction. We have a special team for that will clean all the place between shifts or in the night shift, or what we're doing with offices in different areas. It's really important that even though of the policies and all the new instruction related to reinforcement about COVID-19, we have to reinforce about the management and workers' roles and responsibilities. So management have to ensure they're doing diligence work and comply to all the government recommendation, but workers have to follow those instructions and to ensure their safety and the safety of their own families. Sure, a policy that it's really needed. It's what will be a responses plan for if we have a positive test in the plan. So what will we do? And yes, we can add some other policies as a instruction to wash the hand more often. We can add some other restriction in the plan. If you go into next slide, Jabril, we have some examples of things that can help. So we have those little hand sanitizer. We see them everywhere in commerces coming. So we can add that to the plan. With an example, we can separate the plan into different areas and add that at the entry of areas. So we ensure that have a kind of mitigation plan. Small signs, communication board, and on communication board, if I may, if you use those plastic cover, it makes easy to wash. So that's an example, but there's many things that we need to reinforce what we wash and what we don't wash. So it's part of the hygienic stuff. Ensure to get people time to clean everything if you want your worker to do it. So it can include tools and stuff like that. So you maybe need some some the last picture on the right, some cleaning station for them to make it possible. And on the next slide, we have our three most popular tools now with COVID. So the alcohol gel and the face shield and the little wipes. So ensure to have a lot of them that there are our three essential to have in stocks. COVID-19 risk management and assessment have to be managed in the same way than safety risk. And we have the example of the hierarchy of control. So if you want to be diligent in safety, the recommendation is always try to eliminate the risk and then mitigate it. And after that, you have an administrative control and PPE at the end. So we have to manage, let's say, in the same hierarchy of controls, the new risks that are appearing. Do you want to add something, Daniel?
I would actually. In regards specifically to the response rate, I can share an example here with that's on a larger scale caught some headlines, but it's JBS is a local meat producer, which I think we all are now aware of the incidents with these facilities. And what they did there approximately 2.5 weeks ago, they started kind of this test case study with obviously live infection in the facility. And one of the believed to be more successful practices, which kind of encompasses a few of those points that you referenced, where they had a questionnaire when you walk in. So your typical, what's become typical, how do you feel? Do you have any symptoms? Are you showing any types of symptoms? They then would give a thermal scan to each employee. The thermal scan would then lead them to a clear, all clear, and they would check in for work. Or in the case of a positive, they would then take a secondary test, one of these more, let's say, these swab type of tests. And if that came up positive, then there was a procedure for the employee to go into quarantine. For the initial quarantine for a few days to see if the symptoms pass. And then, of course, given a certain time frame, they would be released back or let go from quarantine, or they would be treated for COVID. And it's something that we do not, let's say, it can be a very sensitive point to discuss given the current climate, but we need to understand in reopening, we are doing, the first part is doing as much precautionary work as you can possible. But then the second part is what happens when you get if you do enough good precautionary work, you still will have the eventual possible case. So it's not just what can I do to avoid my 100 employees spreading the virus or becoming positive tests, but what do I do when I have that one particular case that is a positive? How do I deal with that in an effective manner? Those two sides of the coin are just as critical, I believe, because if you have a good precautionary or preventive system, but you are not able to tie the other end of the shoe, so to speak, you then run into a circumstance where all of the measures, as you see here with the hierarchy of controls, elimination is not currently not an option, I believe, right, with what's going on there. That we have to deal with the living circumstances of this. So having a system in place with all of the precautionary methods, and also having a plan and that risk management portion in place to deal with what comes out of these circumstances, I think is almost just as vital.
Yeah, this is a great pyramid to have in mind actually when approaching this. Good framing. So that takes us to the next step in our discussion, and it's a question for the audience. What phase is your business currently in? Are you closed, working on limited capacity, running 100%, or are you maybe producing different products, adjusting, like we hear a lot of companies are currently pivoting? So you should see a poll appear on your screen.
Yes.
Right now it's 50-50 closed, limited capacity. No one is running 100% or working on new products. Oh yeah, we do have some. Still 45% of the voters. I mean, of the participants. Okay, we're getting close to the quorum here. It's more than 70% soon. So 55% limited capacity, 15 closed. So I guess combined that's 70%. And 25% running at full speed. And with a 5% producing new products. Sorry for the typo there. So 2/3 limited capacity are closed. And well, let's lead me to the next question for either of you, Marie-Andree, Daniel. How are organizations adjusting to prepare for restarting those who are either closed or currently operating on limited capacity?
I'm surprised first by the 50% result on closed business, because here Montreal is closed, but every plant around or the city around, they now can open. So I believe it was something, I believe so the close rate will be a little lower, but thank you for the question. I do appreciate. So sure, for reopening, so that's half of you, this is the case. So for preparing for reopening, because you're closed, we had a lot of references coming from government. So many government have published some checklists to ensure to validate when you will be ready to restart. Some of the first one I'm thinking about, first, validate maybe with your suppliers. Will you be able to receive parts and critical portion of the parts on time? Are your carriers will be running too? Or are they open? Are they opening in the same time of you? Your customers, so you already have maybe some order with delivery date. Is the data still the same? Is the priority still the same? Maybe not. So kind of before reopening, know the new situation of your business with that situation of COVID. Again, if you're able to have the maximum of people working from home, that's, I believe, the only way we can eliminate risk. So for now, and continue, I believe many industries does, so continue to use digital twins, so all the digital portion, or use web-based meeting, different tools. In my plant, we use tablets to be ensured that the production are first able to talk with someone with before going down to the shop floor. So those kinds of reflex, I believe, will last after the crisis. Ensure to minimize the risk. Let's see, we have many ideas we want to share, and Danielle have a lot of ideas, but just a small resume here of them. I have notes about management. How do we manage common areas? So I will show you some example. How can we ensure to have, how will we control our access? We don't want visitors to come, sure, so we maybe have to reinforce policy around that. We will have to identify all the new risks we have in processes. Some ideas to ensure to control, maybe it's production leveling and shift design. I would let Danielle talk about those. New workspace design. I personally does a lot of them since March. So reorganization in pods can be an option. And then if we don't find any areas, sure, we have to find maybe new suppliers for new PPE. So maybe some mask, face shield, gloves, lab coat, or outfit. So how we will manage all of those. So all the management team have to have all those ideas in mind before creating before planning the restart. So on the next slide, I have, I believe I grabbed some pictures of how can we manage common areas. So we have now some barrier. How will we manage our meeting rooms? So it's important, meeting rooms, maybe remove half of the chair as a cafeteria, same thing. We maybe not see well in the picture, but there's like kind glass between the places to ensure people are more than 6 feet from each other. Oh, don't forget parking lot, our common area. So I find these ideas in a town just next to mine. So sorry, that's in French, but um, they on the park and common place, walkways, they just put please stay the social distancing reminder. And don't forget we have to manage to restrooms. So less difficult with ladies restrooms, but with men's restroom, we need to maybe have some visual management to ensure social distancing is respected. Some trick too, we can have new rules regarding meeting rooms. So if we're able to do web meeting rooms, even though if you're in the offices, that will be maybe the first step to try. And we can limit access. So if you have elevators, example, maybe replacing the capacity sign by the new sign regarding COVID. So maybe not more than 2 people at a time in the elevator and those kinds of stuff. Same thing with the cafeteria. Maybe that's a way of manage it. I have other example. So hangers are always a struggle. So I have an example. How can we open the door with the feet and with your arms instead of using your hands after you have washed your hands, especially for restrooms? So it can give you maybe some ideas. We always have some separators in a workstation when the social distancing is not possible, barrier to ensure the circulation is going and people are not just going through workstation example. And for offices or closed production area, we can use the fully modulable walls that can be useful. I personally use to the one that I yellow for welding, so at least people can see, but they cannot talk to each other or touch each other. So that's those kind of example we can use at least for common areas. So if I may, Danielle, I will let you maybe talk about more about or risk management, how we can do that.
Absolutely. And you made a very good point in the previous slide where you referred to there's a few components to the reopening where you have to look at the risk obviously first internally, right? It's what do we do internally to be able to conduct our business? The second part, of course, becomes do we have business to conduct where you're engaging now or reinforcing those relationships with suppliers and customers to be able to manage their circumstances as well as them managing yours, because those interactions, things that we used to take for granted are now very much in the spotlight. And then of course, tying all that together, what changes can we make within our operation to be able to support it, and what improvement levers can we pull? And with that, the common areas is a very good approach. It's something that's critical to look at. It's not just production, what happens in our production. It's what are the touch points in between that we don't always necessarily look at. And I think if you can go to the next slide after the common areas, Jabril. So one, for example, a very common tool like value stream maps, which that's a very, let's say, generic template on the right, but if you're familiar with value stream maps, they're a critical tool to understand the nuances of your key processes. And we normally use these tools with a focus on increasing productivity, reducing the interactions or the total amount of manual hours required for a process, or to just strip down waste from the process and improve communication. But in this particular case, there was a facility here which I've interacted with, which gave me a bit of a different spin, which I wanted to share with the group, where you talk about this focus on safety. how many times have you completed a value stream map with the focus being on social distancing, safety of your employees, the safety of your operation, minimizing the amount of interactions between employees, minimizing the amount of interactions with the product or with the tangible good that you're producing? I would guess 0 or very few. Most of the times we use these tools to either increase output, throughputs, or reduce waste. And in this case, using a VSM with the focus on safety led to a local chip manufacturer here in Minneapolis to be able to produce at a lower level, but produce safely, which kind of ties into the production leveling point, which we kind of referenced. If you're familiar with production leveling, it's really just reducing your level of production so that you can also reduce a lot of the variability within that process. So in this particular case, we're not looking to reduce the level of operations only solely based on the variability. It's also reducing our operations to a point where we can produce safely. And that's, I wish there was a cookie cutter approach. These are 2 examples that came out of a very good conversation with a client here, but they are examples that have worked and yielded fruit. I would also share, as you start to see, I believe a lot of these principles are already wrapped into a, let's say, mature lean culture. So when you hear about organizations, and I think on the next slide we might have 1 or 2, when you hear about organizations who are able to, it seems almost overnight, go from producing product A to pivoting to product B, it's because they're already, let's say, a bit far down their lean journeys. 2 other tools which have become somewhat effective are shift designs. That's a basic DuPont shift model. But how many times do you consider your shift design as a resource? So again, kind of tapping into that mindset portion where you have to really look at everything that you are doing and try to find a way to manage. You can shorten your shifts, lengthen your shifts, increase the number of shifts to minimize the amount of potential source points between employees. You can shorten your work week. Obviously, if you go from a 4 to a 5 day work, from a 5, to a 4 day work week, that will have a huge potential impact on the containment of the virus, right? Or the improvement of your working conditions and keeping them at a high level. The work cell design, as Marie already touched on a bit, another tool that we commonly use, but we use with the emphasis on increasing productivity. So if we look at work cell design, but now through a more safety employee-driven lens, you'll see that it's maybe you are already doing the best you can, but I would also imagine there can be some very quick wins and small modifications that can be made with those safety guidelines and keeping those safety guidelines in mind versus simply looking to increase productivity.
And if I may add, Danielle, the work cells design can lead really to have, if you have many cells or many production line, it's maybe a good opportunity to have some self-contained teams. So you're creating teams and you can dedicate them an area. As example, some companies just rent special trucks, so they provide separate cafeterias and locker rooms. So you have the blue cafeteria for the blue team and for the blue area, so you can already use your 5S colors, so people will be used to use them. So those teams can just it's also applied to management and support teams. So maybe we have one support function instead of covering many lines, just cover that portion of the line, but for many kind of support on site, just to ensure to wear the right PPEs and minimize the number of different people going in the area. So that can be a really good example of how we can mitigate the risk and have less exposure to everyone.
And also in the previous point of talk of our discussion about what happens with a potential positive, let's say, case, That's a very good control mechanism in place that's built into the process, built into the design, so that if you run into a circumstance where you have 10 work cells with 5 people per work cell and 2 shifts, so you're effectively dealing with 100 people, if there is a positive test that comes out of your facility, you're able to trace it and you're able to limit the exposure to, let's say, those individual work cells. So even in the restarting, you're not, let's say, you are restarting in a manner that allows you to deal, if we go back to this dial concept, so you're able to slowly ramp up and build up your capacity, but also with a built-in mechanism where if something does not go optimally, it doesn't cripple your entire operation. You're still able to function, and you have a mitigation plan in the short term to deal with those particular cases. And I believe, to Marie's point, if you go to the next slide, Jabril, you'll see there's, and this kind of ties in a lot of what we have previously mentioned. If for organizations who are already further down their lean journeys, they are able to adapt, and this is kind of built. It's not something that you deal with, it's something you already do. Where you talk about daily management meeting and Gemba meetings, you talk about visual management. Now, could anyone predict, the circumstances at hand? No, but the use of your 5S and your Gemba meetings and your existing visual management tools can be a critical part in allowing you to pivot and get back into operations a lot quicker. Topics that may have previously been, let's say, glanced over, like a Gemba meeting, a daily exchange. For those familiar with Gemba meetings, they're short, informal sessions, usually in the work area as a small group, but they're very close knit, and there's a lot of sharing going on. So, how do you modify that, or how do you deal with that in the new, with the new restrictions? One example is you can have obviously some electronic communication, as Marie already mentioned. You can go towards tablets, you can go towards a uniform system with management, where management begins to, let's say, collect responses. You want to eliminate touch points like papers and those things, so anything you can do digitally would be obviously very much a better mode of operation. But you want to look at these small touch points, and there's many ways to adapt without totally crippling what you're doing. Now, does it mean that you're going to open up your doors and operate the way you did, let's say, before you closed or before production was limited? No. But what it does mean is that with some very strong guidance, some good leadership, and obviously the existing tool, a lot of the existing lean tools and methodologies that you're already using will allow you to come out of this and adapt, respond very quickly, and have effective, positive results.
Yeah, and I have an idea regarding daily management meeting. Maybe you can just, instead of focusing, like you said previously, Danielle, on focusing on results and commitment and performance, maybe just ask the supervisor to collect queries and concern from operator every morning, so that the HR department can publish and update a daily list of question and answers, which are displayed on monitors around the factory. So it can help the communication process, and we can use the timeline or the time I really reserve for daily management meeting for that. And personally, autonomous maintenance, sometimes it can be really more difficult to implement. We can have some union restriction. So I personally find that it can be an opportunity to reinforce that sense that it's an opportunity of change.
Also, just a general rule of thumb, anything that you think of that was a resounding no previous, those discussions now can happen with maybe different results, right? We need to create some improvement plan. Well, that involves construction, we can't do it, doesn't make sense. No, all of a sudden, some of those discussions, we need to take our training virtual, right? Why do we have, there's some trainings we can handle virtually. Why are we doing these in person? Well, it's the way we've always done them. Obviously, these types of incidences yield to a more flexible, agile mind in terms of looking at some of these resources and kind of pivoting towards maybe a different solution that maybe was not necessarily was not considered previously or taken seriously previously. And with that, I think that kind of ties into the next point, which is, as I see the time here, I will be brief. As we start, as I mentioned earlier, I was fascinated when I hear about organizations who are producing product A and all of a sudden within a week are up and running producing product B. And it kind of boggles, as someone who spent a lot of years in different operational settings, those are things I just enjoy reading about and trying to understand. And there's two examples here of the term pivot, which has a slightly different meaning to all, but I will share mine here. The first one is the pivot within industry. So Carhartt, which I imagine most folks are familiar with, it's a 130-plus-year-old clothing manufacturer. They produce some, let's say, normal attire or day-to-day working gear, but they're very much into the heavy industrial uniforms. It's big in the construction industry, and they've pivoted within industry to produce gowns for hospital workers and masks, which they were not producing before. So I say pivot within industry because they are simply taking their resources and they're using their internal skills to be able to produce a product that has a benefit now, where maybe there was a market, maybe there was not a market before, but there obviously at this point is a need. And to be clear, the slide is a little small, but in that note, Carhartt has donated 2.5 million masks. So you're talking about an organization who is operating now with obviously the in-industry pivot. They're still producing clothing attire, but it's in a very different field and for a different need, serving a different purpose. The lower half is a bit more outside of the box, which is a more drastic or massive pivot, which is outside of industry. And that's basically Ford and GE partnered using a facility in Michigan, which used to produce engine components. And now they're producing the face shields, which you see there on the right, and ventilators, which are not electric based. So they're based on air pressure. They meet the needs for the COVID crisis in hospitals across the US. And they're now producing 200,000 face shields per day and 20,000 modified ventilators per week. The interesting part, obviously, is being able to pivot your operations in a way that allow you to tap into something totally new. The other interesting part is that this was as of the beginning of April. 100 days from the production of their first ventilator, they had a goal of now producing 30,000 modified ventilators. So you're talking about not only a massive pivot in producing a totally new product that they were not familiar with, that they had to kind of re-engineer and redesign to fit their capacity and their production constraints, but now they're talking about a 50% increase in that production as well. So all of this is to say, the organizations, if you have a strong lean presence, you can take some of these opportunities to be able to really flex and use the agility within your businesses to be able to come up with really creative solutions for some of the world's biggest problems at this point. But if you are not far along in your lean journey, you can still do quite a bit to secure your employees and your operations locally. As Marie mentioned, I too was surprised at the number of, let's say, closed or limited facilities. So if you find yourself in that position, I would simply recommend, taking a look at what you're doing, seeing how you can do it differently, and keeping your people in focus, because Another slightly more unfortunate story on the Minnesota side, there's one or two instances where I have clients who opened up but did not have employees show up because they did not take some of the protocols that maybe they could have to secure or add that safety, that the safety features that employees feel needed or feel were required for them to return to work. So you want to make sure you keep the focus, one, on the business, what you can do with your resources, but then two, the focus needs to be on safety of the employees and safety within the making sure they feel they have a comfortable place to work, and you as a manager or leader within the business are providing that environment for all of your employees, all of your customers, and anyone who comes in contact with your operation, because we're all equally responsible at this point for the safety of one another. And I think I cut it short a little on time. I believe there might be a couple minutes for questions. Jabril?
Yes, all right, very good. I think we covered all the points we wanted to cover today. We still have a couple minutes for Q&As if anyone wants to share a question. If not, well, the entire format was Q&A really, so we try to reflect here with this presentation answers to the most commonly asked questions here. On my end, I remember that 70%, more or less 2/3 of you are either closed or limited capacity, and are also 2/3 still kind of grasping the questions of how do we complete our risk management and also handle the potential, either effective or potential shortage of people, right? HR. The tools we shared, I find personally really very useful in the sense that it's really kind of shows how all the frameworks, the ABCs of lean management apply here and can be very powerful. The hierarchy of controls, the different methods, Pokayoke, just foolproofing the systems, and all these different maintenance, total productive maintenance are still even more so actually useful. And also an opportunity for really creatively taking advantage, transforming this not as just a reactive situation, but really a proactive opportunity to make some changes that before were kind of put on the back burner. Maybe the resources or the investment needed in the short term were not favorable to looking at a longer term perspective. And here you're both helping to address short-term pain points, and at the same time you can use them to build for the long term. We heard some examples there, and like recently, for example, we also heard a company that clearly knew that the I think quality control area was really not positioned in the right place in their plants, but they just kept it that way and actually kept investing into trying to make it work the best way possible, just because it was difficult to imagine moving it somewhere else where they knew it should be, but that involved breaking some walls and just changing an entire conveyor belt, and now is the opportunity to do that, and they knew that it was anyway the right thing to do. So with that, I don't see any questions. I do see thank you notes. If I missed any question, actually, yes, I see one maybe set in healthcare. Actually, a healthcare organization that is working in a limited capacity, but creating opportunity for manufacturing face shields and reusable face masks to sustain current needs. So how does this apply to different places, including hospitals, is the question. What would be your recommendation for companies that provide I'm sorry, because I'm trying to look at the questions here. Oh, there you go. So 2 questions to recap. Belong to a healthcare industry where limited capacity, we are on limited capacity, but create opportunity for us by manufacturing face shields and reusable face masks to sustain current needs. So I guess that's a comment that to illustrate the pivot. A question, what would be your recommendation for companies that provide service and repair of medical devices, since we do not only handle suppliers for parts, but also receive devices from various places, including hospitals? So I guess, yeah, that adds even more so like the sensitivity of handling equipment that's coming back from the hospitals, right?
Yeah, I would say without obviously getting to the granular level, I imagine, so there should be a plan in place from the hospitals regarding the disposal and disinfecting of equipment and waste. So if you think back to the Ebola virus, there is a very specific waste stream process that was used to treat that type of waste. COVID is not necessarily in that same, let's say, that same level of contagion, but with regards to waste streams, but with regards to products, with anything that has, let's say, plastic surfaces, I think it's clear, you can debate how long the virus survives, but it's clear that the virus can survive days on these types of surfaces. So if you're in that business, I imagine I would first want to see some sort of process from the hospitals as what they're doing, treating it, or for lack of a better word, the sterilization process before they ship. And if not, as a service provider, we talk about the idea of pivoting, I would look at being able to create that for them. Where, okay, so you have no capability to be able to sterilize or do anything with these products currently before you ship them back to us. So we can either create that additional service, or we can provide guidelines that we would like for you in order to keep the business relationship open. We'll provide our guidelines for treating, preparing, cleaning, disinfecting, or sterilizing whatever equipment it is that you are managing. So I'd look at it again, if you take the relationship approach, reach out, have these discussions. This is new to everyone, so I imagine we're much more tolerant to these discussions now than maybe a few months ago. But I would look at it from that approach. They either already have a plan in which you can then look and assess and say, okay, this is fine as long as this process is being completed, I'm okay with accepting this equipment. Or you can, if they're willing and you have the relationship, you can then impose the guidelines that you feel safe with and your organization believes would be suitable for the sterilization of that equipment. And that would be a starting point. And then from there, of course, as we touched on, your internal dynamics need to be defined very clearly as well as to how you treat this type of material or these types of products, what you do once you're receiving procedure, all of, as you can see, tying in that first step then leads to what you do internally with it and how you manage the risk management within your operation as well. So I hope that provides at least a little guidance or a potential, let's say, starting point for those discussions.
If I may add on it,
yeah, please.
Sorry, General. If I may add on it, don't forget that the packaging material will be something we need to manage too. So even though if you receive the material, you may have some instruction, procedure, or even PPE to your people to ensure to protect them, even though if the material is sterilized. And if you're not able yourself to clean the material, it will be a kind of contamination that you can return, or potential contamination. So ensure to have that discussion too with the hospital if you're doing like a cleaning services before, that they have to cleaning back or do some sterilization, even though if you're taking care of risk management, so how they are comfortable with your risk management when you ship back the equipment.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's where the comment also about the value stream mapping comes handy as well, right? I hadn't thought about the full value stream mapping, right? It's at there is a need for sterilization at the entrance, but also at the exit. We do have a question regarding when do you need to bring in a medical or industrial hygiene specialist?
It will be with you're confident of you understand what you need to do. So with the example with the previous question, I won't be able to answer how we should clean which product and those kinds of stuff. So an hygienic specialist may be able to help you, or if you're not able to do your risk assessment and you're not sure about the answer, that's maybe a good opportunity to have someone to be able to judge your work.
Yeah, and I think to Marie's point, starting at ground zero, the resources are internal, I believe, right? You need to have some framework and some questions, at least some blueprint laid out to be able to say, this is what we think we can do to deal with this type of service or this type of product. And then at that point, I would look maybe to have some assistance externally to kind of add those additional layers. Because I smiled before when you mentioned that, because the previous comment, usually when you get to the shipping part of the VSM, that's usually when everyone's relieved because it's almost finished, right? The hard work is the front part. But now, as you see, given this climate, the little arrow, that arrow to the end to the customer now, that there's a few more steps before that. But just that specific question, you want to define, obviously, as Marie mentioned, you have your you look at your processes and your services, what you have, and then you want to be able to bring in someone so that they can add their added value, not necessarily from scratch, so to speak.
All right. All right, so we're just past the hour. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing today your thoughts. And so in terms of next steps, please look out for an email with a link to the post-webinar assessment if you're interested in receiving a professional development hour certificate. And if you want, feel free to add me on your address book, just so that we make sure the email doesn't get caught in spam. Other next step, if you have any needs for products that help implement these solutions, be in touch. We're happy to help. And I think some of you may be actually manufacturing some products of interest to others, so also reach out. And so we also have a certain number of brochures related to different products, not these necessarily, but if you need help with organizing your office space, training your teams, reorganizing the workflow with maybe the floor racks, trolleys, and so on, or digital visual management, digital KPIs, well, I'm happy to send you the corresponding brochures. And be in touch. We are on LinkedIn, all of us, the three of us. You see the links right here. We'll be happy to send a copy of the presentation. If you wish to receive it, let me know. I'm also available through LinkedIn and by phone or email. Also, I'd like to invite you all to join our LinkedIn group, where we have now more than 1,500 members, all of them peers, no spam, primarily meant to inform you of our webinars and also sharing some useful information. And I welcome also any contributions from you. If you'd like to, if you find something interesting that you'd like to share, please go ahead or send it to me, and I'm happy to share it as well. Again, thank you very much all, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Take care.